Hello, I'm here with Phil Dibowitz, production engineer at Facebook and Chef community member for a very long time. Phil, thanks so much for taking the time with me today.
My pleasure.
So, you gave a very interesting talk at the conference this week called The Softer Side of DevOps. And for those of us that aren't familiar with the softer side of DevOps, tell us what that's about.
So, my keynote 3 years ago was very much on the technical side of the transformation we made to getting people to own their own configs and doing the DevOps-y type of work that we wanted them to do, which obviously led into a cultural shift, and that was our primary goal, but it wasn't what I spoke about. I spoke about the technology behind it. And Adam and a bunch of other people have been pushing me for a long time to talk about the cultural side of it. How do you foster that culture that we had spent years building? And so that's fundamentally what the talk was about. The roadblocks you get, the questions people would ask me about building culture, and how you foster a culture where you have all of these aspects that we talk about when we talk about DevOps.
I mean, so you're living this. Tell us a little bit about what people can do, some of those challenges, and then how they can overcome those challenges to that culture building.
Sure, so a couple of things I mentioned in the talk. One is actually supporting people, right? So you get a lot of questions about, oh, there's a team that I don't think is technical enough or capable enough to use these tools, or there's a team that refuses to, or whatever. And I think step one is really supporting those teams and giving them not only the tools and training, but like actually rooting for them, actually making sure they feel safe to fuck up, right? Like, because you're asking them to do something new and they're gonna mess up. So you need to give them that safety to do that. You need to have postmortems where people can talk about what went wrong and how without feeling blamed, without feeling like they're gonna lose their job. And you have to really invest a lot in those people so that they can make that transformation. You're asking people to step out of their comfort zone, use new tools, use new paradigms, and they have to feel safe to do that. And if you invest in those people and you do all of those things, 9 times out of 10, they will step up and they will learn and they will move on. And if they don't, you should let them go. You should fire them, right? Like, and that was a big part of the talk as well, is that needs to be your last resort, and also it has to be on the table.
Yeah, because for some people it may just not be a good fit, and they'll go find somewhere that does fit.
Absolutely.
And it's going to be better for the team and for that individual in the long run.
Yeah, you can't build a culture with people who are counter to that culture. If you're trying to build whether that culture be inclusive and diverse, or whether that be about building good relationships between developers and operations, whatever it is, like, people who can't or won't or do that, they're toxic to your environment. And it doesn't mean that they're bad people. That means that they're not the right people for your organization to build the culture you want to build, and you need to part ways.
You've got to buy into the way it's going to be done, or you're not going to be able to help, and you're not yourself going to get anything out of it.
Exactly.
So you mentioned both inclusivity and openness, and kind of fundamental things you've got to approach building a DevOps culture within an organization.
Absolutely.
There's been a lot of talk recently about inclusiveness. Adam, of course, gave a talk that was a lot about caring and the principles of how you can do that. And then there's a counter argument to that, which is like, hey, like, you guys are technology people, like, you have to broaden your horizons, get out of technology if you're really going to be inclusive and open, and bring the people at the end of the experience, right? Our consumers, our customers, those that don't understand the process. How can we include a broader community in what we're building here?
So I think inclusiveness is a lot of things. I don't think there's one thing, right? It's both being aware of the imbalances that exist in the world, whether that be, the pay gap, or whether that be discussing things like police shootings and realizing that there's a lot of different people in that room who may feel differently about that. It's about being aware that there are inequalities and inequities, and I don't necessarily know what your experience is. And that doesn't mean, and I say this over and over again, not everyone agrees with me, but I think it's important to realize that doesn't mean you can't talk about those things. It doesn't mean walk on eggshells. It doesn't mean censor yourself. It just means having that conversation in a way that other people feel comfortable, giving their opinion and their side of it, and being willing to ask the questions and listen to those things. And then when it comes down to like the more, technical aspects of this, right? One of the things I tell my team is, people love to say that typical code reviews, the meritocracy, it doesn't exist and it doesn't work. And I don't agree. But I think that you can have really rough code reviews where you pull people's code apart and do that in a way that can be inclusive. And the rules that I set forward for my team are, one, that you always attack the code and not the person, the idea, not the person, right? But
it's
that's
not personal, it's just code.
Yes, and that's step one, and then but that's not enough. And step two is as for lack of a better term, effervescently negative as you're going to be on the one end, you must be equally effervescently positive on the other end. So for example, if you're like, man, that really sucks, that's gonna blah, 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 and then you explain to them how to do it better, when they come back and they make a really elegant solution, you can't be like, cool.
Yeah, you gotta be just equally supportive as you were critical.
Exactly, you gotta be, oh, that's really great, nice job, blah, blah, blah. And if you're not willing to do that, then you can't be aggressively
you shouldn't be tossing around criticism.
Exactly, then you just have to be like, hey, please do this way. Like, it has to be balanced on both sides, right? People need to know that you're as excited about the good work they're doing as you're upset about the bad work they're doing. Otherwise, you add to the imbalances, because people, I think, who are on the negative side of an imbalance, they don't have that constant reinforcement that, like, me as a successful white guy in the industry has. Like, I know people think I'm good at my job, but if you're coming in and you're a minority, you may not know all of the people who think you're good at your job, and you're far more disproportionately affected by someone giving you a negative code review. Now, that negative code review adds to the quality of the code base, and I'm not telling people not to do it. You just have to balance it some way to add to that inclusiveness.
I love getting real about it, right? Like, get real about it. I love that. So they're ringing the bell, and we're about to be out of time here. I'd love to finish. The chef community, you've been a part of it for a long time. You and the Facebook team have contributed an enormous amount of code and practices and your thought leadership to it. How have you seen the community change since you started with it?
So I see the community has grown in a bunch of different ways. We see chefs added new things. The Chef Server Core became open source, which was a beautiful thing. I think there's two massive directional changes I've seen. One is, I think Chef as a company has hit a stride in their growth and in their understanding of what it means to be an open source company, which they didn't have when I came into the company. They were still figuring out what all that meant. And I think that Chef as a company has hit that stride. They know what that means. They know they're comfortable with it. They know where they want to be an open source company. They know where they want to have their proprietary value adds. And there's no longer do we want to do this? Do we not want to do this? There's a comfort in the company. The other thing I've seen is if that's, like, I guess, a positive trend, the negative trend, and I don't think it's negative, but the other side of it, I guess, is the company is struggling and the community is struggling with how to balance the incredible flexibility that Chef brings, which is the reason that companies like Facebook can use it, and the reason that you can sort of do anything you want with it, well, how do you onboard new people who walk in and see this just array of different directions to go? And
it's choose your own adventure. Well, what adventure do I want to choose?
Right, and so there's a struggle of, like, well, do we make the tool more guided, or do we just provide docs that show people, like,
better on ramps into it?
Right, and I think the company struggles with this a lot, and the community struggles with this a lot, and I fight really hard for not changing the flexibility of the tool and instead just providing a better on ramping experience. And I think the company's struggling with it. The company's growing and trying to grow their customer base, and and the money and the people and all of this stuff, and the community on the same side is also trying to foster adoption and foster new use cases.
And bring new people in.
And you talk, like, to bring it back to our previous conversation, you're trying to be inclusive and blah, blah, blah. Well, you want to also be inclusive, not just on gender or race or whatever, but also on, like, experience, newbies. And it's hard. You want to balance making it comfortable for someone who's never touched these tools, someone who doesn't know about DevOps, someone who's never done this kind of work. But at the same time, you don't want to dumb down the tool. You don't want to
because then it loses its value.
It loses its value. You don't want to get to the point where you're like, oh, it was so easy to step up to this, but the next step, there is no more next step. Right? You just want to add a whole bunch of steps so that it's easy to get to that top level.
And I think at the very least, folks like yourselves who have so much experience and who are certainly known well within the community, at least starting to have that conversation, right? And putting that out there and saying, hey, this is an issue, let's talk about it. That's at least an initial step. And certainly there's a ton of talented people here. We got 1,500 folks in attendance. And if we can at least be having those conversations and bringing the right people together to keep that conversation going, I think we'll get where we need to be.
And we spoke a lot about this at the CBGB meeting. So I'm a member of the CBGB board, and we talked a lot about that and the mailing list or discourse or whatever it is. Like, we talk about these things openly, and I think that's what's great about the chef community is it's not the chef company goes off and does the thing. There's the company and the community, and we're one, and we talk about these things in a useful way, and there will be missteps, and that's okay, because
Yeah.
we'll address them.
Sometimes you got to fail to learn.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, Phil, thank you so much for taking the time. It's always a pleasure to see you. I like getting real about what's really going
Yeah, this
on.
was fun.
And thank you for taking the time.
It was good talking to you, man.